Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be with you to give the keynote speech for this conference. I'll be talking about food safety challenges in general and about antimicrobial resistant foodborne pathogens. It is an honor to join you. Please forgive my voice and because I have a severe case of cold which prevented me from joining you live in Korea. I'll start my presentation now. So the title of my talk today is One Approach to Rule Them All. And that approach is One Health, because as everybody knows, it encompasses human health, animal health, and environmental health. And how does One Health factor into the challenges of food safety that we are facing uh, during these times? So what I'm going to do, I'll be talking a little bit about the research that I do. And then from there, I'm going to highlight some of the challenges that affect food safety. And then I'm going to introduce one of those major challenges in more details, which is antimicrobial resistance. And then I'm going to show how One Health can be used to address some of these issues based on some of the research that I have done in different places. So without further introductions, I'll start my presentation. Okay, my slides. Okay, so the reason why I'm going to talk about my research history, because that's going to explain really well what I'm going to be talking about later on during the presentation. So I have been, for the past 2 decades or more, working on Campylobacter and Salmonella, foodborne pathogens, mainly Campylobacter, and I'm interested in their biology and their epidemiology. And I'm also interested in their antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial resistance is a major component in my work. Under that, Campylobacter and Salmonella factor in. And I also have keen interest in the emergence of colistin resistance, which I have been working on for the past 8 years. All of this work, all of these interests are directed towards the understanding of the biology of the foodborne pathogens, understanding the factors that influence the emergence of antimicrobial resistance, and how to control the emergence of antimicrobial resistance and lessen the burden of foodborne pathogens by using different things like probiotics, organic acids, policy, etc. And I had the pleasure and the fortune of doing this work on 3 different continents. So I'm currently in the States. I have started in the States. I also did research in Africa on Campylobacter and antimicrobial resistance and on food safety systems. And I also did work on Asia, which is mainly the Middle East area. So this experience factored into my view of food safety, because I have seen different countries with different capabilities addressing these issues. And I also have seen how different countries can affect others, right? So we are talking about infectious agents, right? Campylobacter and Salmonella. We're talking about antimicrobial resistance. And as we all know, as what we have been seeing throughout history and in our experience, they know no borders, okay? So if there's a problem in one country, that problem can spread, especially in times where we import food heavily and we live in a globalized economy. Another thing to keep in mind when we are moving through the slides, in my work, in my research, in my views on food safety, I always adopt the major principle of toxicology that was coined by Paracelsus in 1538. Okay, so all things are poison and nothing is without poison. What is important is the dosage, right? Dosage can make a poison or a medicine. In many instances, there are chemicals, there are compounds that we use them as medicine, but if you change the dose, they become poisonous. Infectious dose, similar. You know, you have certain bacteria, certain microorganisms, viruses that are only infectious, can only lead to symptoms if they have a certain infectious dose. Famously, even water can be intoxicating if water is consumed at high levels. They can lead to detrimental impact on health. So this is one of the themes that permeate, and it actually uh, is a really good segue into our introduction to poisoning and into our knowledge on infectious diseases, right? So throughout history, humans, us as a culture or as a population, we had experience with poison. We had experience with that's evolving from early times when we started as a society and forwards. You know, poisoning, for example, is infamously known to be chemistry used in anger or despair. There are famous incidents with like Cleopatra and the asp when she poisoned herself using poison from animal source, which was the snake. Um, and there is another example with Socrates, who was poisoned by hemlock in his drink. There is more of a mythical story about Pope Alexander Borgia, who used to get rid of his political adversaries by poisoning them in food. And then, of course, there are allegedly the use of poison to in political strife or political issues, where most recently there were news about certain people being poisoned by others. So we have a history with poison that has evolved as we evolve. And this is not very different from food safety, right? Because also our knowledge of poisoning via food safety, via food or foodborne pathogens evolved in the same way as we evolved. So we started prior to being industrialized for foraging for food, right? And back then, when we used to forage for food, it was by experimentation. We would eat food. If it's good, we will stick to it, we'll stick with it. If it's not good, then we will seek other sources. As we became more evolved, as we became, our communities, societies become more developed, this started to change. Now we started to get into agriculture, started to have our animals, and from there started producing food, and that food changed. So it's no longer by experimentation. Now you have somebody who's growing the food, somebody who's processing the food, somebody who's distributing the food. It became a complex system to feed a complex and modern society. So in that regard, the challenges changed. So what was based on experience now needs a system to be regulated because there are many different complicated components that are involved in that. So as we developed challenges to food safety, developed our understanding of the elements and factors that contribute to food safety developed. One of the things that I always share with my colleagues and my students is this very, very interesting article that while we are evolving, while we were developing, as I mentioned earlier, we had encounters with some of the pathogens that are currently still a challenge that we are facing right now. So this is a wonderful article that actually shows that in 1545 in Mexico, in an Aztec population, it's apparently there are many people who suffered from Salmonella enterica infections. Back then, they didn't know it was Salmonella, they didn't know how it was contracted, etc. So these pathogens have been with us. Some of these foodborne pathogens have been with us. We are we came to know them better during the past 100 or so years when modern microbiology started, and when and our understanding of microbiology, bacteria, and the isolation of bacteria, and the nomenclature of bacteria and their properties emerged. But they have been with us, and they are likely going to stay with us for a long time. So this is an intimate relationship between humans and food, and the safety of food, and the repercussions of having food that's poisoned or not appropriate for consumption. If we look at modern food environment, like if you look at the first thing that a consumer sees, this consumer will see a food service environment or a food service location. If we just look at these locations, like a restaurant or a deli or a supermarket, these are complex and dynamic environment. They are not simple environment. They include different material. They could different people working on different things, different equipment, and it's moving. So the goods, they come in, they are processed, they are sold, and the cycle goes on. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is that I'm showing you that when you have an environment like this, then error can happen. And if error can happen, whether intentional or non-intentional, whether by due to negligence or due to factors that are not within the grasp of the or the control of the people producing the food, it can happen because of the complexity of the environment, and it's all these parts that are shifting. So what we have here also in the food service environment is that nowadays it's so diversified. So you have like fast food, you have school cafeterias, you have hospital cafeterias, you have restaurants, you have high-end restaurants, you have delis. So it's very diversified, and also you can have things that are specialized, that are targeting, for example, vegan food, etc. And this also indicates that we are living in a very connected world. So I can visit a Japanese restaurant or a Korean restaurant here in the States, and they can have ingredients that have been bought from those markets, right? So all of this, getting food from a different location, getting it to another location, processing it, and getting it to the consumer involves so many different steps, which makes it even more complex, which increases the possibility of errors, and those errors can potentially include issues that can impact food safety. In addition to all of this, living in a modern society, we rely heavily on food services because it's a busy society, right? And we demand high quality, fast services, and low prices. And these are all drivers to that can lead to errors and problems. And this is just talking about the food service. What's beyond food service? What's beyond that environment? There are many components, from food production at pre-harvest levels, to harvesting, to processing the food. And we might not be talking about simplistic food, simple foods, like you can be talking about, for example, ready-to-eat dishes that may have rice and chicken or meat, and then the consumer will warm them up at home and just consume them. And then all the way to the market, all the way to the consumer. Each of those steps is complicated, is dynamic, it has multiple things that can go wrong there, because they are not simple. We are living, as I said, in a complicated, fast growing environment, and many mistakes can happen. But with that said, this is the reason why we need a good food safety system. Now, when mistakes happen, okay, those mistakes can be costly. I mean, the audience is not foreign to these statistics, but I'm just talking here in generalities. So when issues happen, those issues can be severe and detrimental. This includes like the burden of foodborne diseases that was estimated by the WHO in 2015. One in 10 people can fall ill. 33 million healthy life years can be lost. We are talking about almost 500,000 deaths. And the most affected are children. Almost one third of the people that of the death due to foodborne diseases are children that are less than 5 years old. So despite all the challenges, we cannot take the safety of food lightly, and because the toll would be detrimental on human health. Okay. Um, Another statistics from the WHO. So half of the global burden of foodborne diseases is caused by 31 different hazards. Of those are known the virus, norovirus, Campylobacter, Salmonella. These are among the most famous, E. coli. And then the burden of this diarrheal causing agents is also very high. Again, this is another reason why food safety should be a major concern in modern times during these times. So to delve more into the burden of foodborne illnesses and the necessity of food safety, um, certain reports out there, it's clear that foodborne infections can be diverse. They can lead to different outcomes. It's estimated that around 200 diseases from diarrhea to cancer can be associated with foodborne infections or contaminated food, whether it is bacterial or chemical. And all of this that we are highlighting, the toll on human health, is also going to lead to an impact on the economy. So people are getting sick, means people won't be able to work, means medical bills are going to go higher, means confidence in the product is going to go low. There are expenses associated with withdrawing the food after it's been processed from the market due to contamination. All of this will have a major economic impact. So basically, what we're talking about here is that impact on human health and impact on an economy. And when you have this, what will result is a cycle of disease. Is because when you have poverty, okay, due to economic issues, then the risk of food safety increases, right? And the toll of diseases, the impact of diseases increases. In the States, this is in all the statistics, it's not a new, but in the States, it's estimated that foodborne illnesses cost 77.7 billion in burden. And some people say that this is a conservative estimate and needs to be revised. The other thing that about foodborne illnesses that makes them a major focus or an important aspect is that the range of symptoms and how fast somebody can get an illness. So sometimes in 30 minutes, and then based on the nature of the infection itself, if you are infected, if someone is infected with a pathogenic agent, a virus, a bacterium, or a parasite, this person who's affected can spread the infection to other members who did not necessarily eat from the food. And then and the infection can be acute or can be chronic. Chronic infections, they can lead to permanent organ failure that would require long-term medication, and they can debilitate the patient. So it's not only loss of life, but also debilitating impact that they have. And the most and the people or the populations that are most prone to foodborne infection are pregnant women, the elderly, children, and patients with chronic illnesses. Because of decreased immunity, that makes them more prone to these infections, as everyone knows. So the diversity of symptoms is also mirrored by the diversity of the etiologic agents. So talking only about the microbial aspect, in the States, for example, there are 31 major pathogens that are responsible or involved in the majority of the microbial foodborne illnesses. Of course, here we're not including the chemical contaminants. But the whole idea here is that complex environment, complex food production system, the bacterial, the etiologic agent is not something to be trifled with. It is, it poses a challenge, excuse me, it poses a challenge because of its complexity and diversity, the onset of the symptoms, etc. Now, when things go bad, they can go bad very quickly, as we mentioned, and they can go bad affecting brands, affecting people, as we said, over a long period of time. Excuse me. So one of the infamous E. coli outbreaks happened in 1993. It's infamous and it's very well known, very well documented. And people say that this is one of the major reasons where we now have FSMA, for Food Safety Modernization Act. So this is one of the motivators of the modernization of food safety in the States. This is an outbreak that affected 73 restaurants in 4 different states in the USA. So it's over a wide geographical area, affecting 732 people. That's a lot of people that have been documented and known. And unfortunately, 4 children died and 178 individuals out of the 732 were permanently and severely affected. So this is a great loss, and not only in human life, but also to the brand itself, because it resulted in severe damages to the brand. From that incident, there were many. It received lots of coverage in the media, rightfully so. It needs to be covered, but it's unavoidable. It was unavoidable after everything was known. It was really avoidable. It was a minor change in the cooking temperature of the burger patties that resulted in these problems. And this story here of Riley Detweiler, one of the kids that lost their life due to the outbreak, is very telling, because Riley never consumed any burger. He just went to a school or a nursery where there was another kid who was carrying the pathogen, E. coli OMA5787. He contracted that pathogen and he lost his life. So when we talk about food safety, okay, there's the direct contact with the food itself, but then also there's the spread of the infectious disease beyond the affected individual. The incident was covered in a famous book called Poisoned, and it's, as I mentioned, one of the motivators for the modernization of food safety in the States and beyond. So the States have a relatively one of the best food safety systems, right? Other countries do not have similar resources and similar capabilities. Recently, there was an outbreak in South Africa that became dubbed as the listeria hysteria in the media. And what happened is that it's one of the largest foodborne outbreak documented in recent history, where around 1,000 confirmed cases in the lab. 42% of these cases were babies, and around 216 people died. And after all what happened, it was implicated to a cold cut meat, and litigations actually are still ongoing. So this happened in 2018, and the ramifications are still ongoing, in addition to the loss of life, etc. So this is a country that might not have a good, or as in comparison to the States, the resources to have a robust food safety system. A similar story happened in Uganda recently, 2019, where 250 people were ill, and 3 lost their life. And this was attributed to a cereal that's consumed and distributed by the World Food Program. So even when you have the best intentions, the best controls, things can go bad. And when things go bad due to the complexity that we have been talking about of the pathogens themselves and of producing foods and distributing the food, then these issues will rise. And this is why food safety is an emphasis, should be an emphasis. Not only countries, but also populations. Some populations are more prone to infectious diseases than others. These include refugees, and we are living in a time where the number of refugees is at a long time, at an all-time high, with the problems in different countries, including recently in Ukraine, before that in Syria, etc. So wars lead to refugees. Refugees don't have means to access safe food, and they rely heavily on the hosting communities, and this can lead to problems. This is an incident that happened in an Iraqi refugee camp where 800 people, mostly children, were poisoned by a meal provided by a charity, despite best intention. To the point when, if you want to take this a little bit to a bigger level, beyond than just the direct impact on people and direct impact on the economy and populations and countries, but safe food, as we all know, as the audience well knows, that it's an integral part of food security, right? If you don't have safe food, you cannot achieve food security. You cannot feed a population. You cannot, even if you have the food, even if the food is accessible, even if the food is cheap, even if the food is nutritious, if it is contaminated, and if it is contaminated beyond salvage, then that's an issue. It's not available. That means it cannot be used, and that can affect food security. And food security is also, with the current economy, with the current crises that we are witnessing in the globe, is becoming an issue for many different countries. So all of this, all of these different case studies, all of these factors, just to highlight where we are in terms of food safety and why we should prioritize it. So all that I have talked about now should lead to a conclusion that we need a food safety field should be multidisciplinary. It should include different professionals from different expertise, policy, science, like microbiology, biotechnology, all kinds of different things fall into this modern food safety. So we are very far away from the hunter-gatherer kind of experience. We need now a discipline that can ensure all that what I have been talking about earlier does not happen. A food safety now, in my opinion, is a right. A food safety is a right. It's like right to water, right to be free. Also, food safety is a right. It's a human right. But even today, there are challenges, and those challenges keep on piling up. Some of these challenges, some of them are old, some of them are unfolding right now, and some of them are new. We have one of the challenges is a rapid population growth. We have more people, right? The human population is increasing, and increasing a human population means we need to generate more food. Generating more food and sending that food to where it should go as I said, it's a complex, dynamic, complicated issue that will result in contamination of the food. If I have a rapid population and I'm like sourcing certain products from other countries, and those countries don't have a good food safety culture or approaches, then that food that I'm getting might be contaminated, even if I have a good food safety system in my own country, right? So it's a connected environment, which leads you to the global market. As we are, as I have mentioned, right? We are connected. So if there's a very famous example that I'm going to share with you later on is that I worked at one point with sesame seed. I researched sesame seed that were imported from a country in Africa. They were imported with salmonella contamination. They were processed into something else, into a paste, and some of the contamination persisted, and then they were exported to a different country where an outbreak happened, right? So being connected is good, but being connected also comes with its challenges. With the need to send food across the globe and with the even locally, so we have now improved transport logistics, which is something good. But with improved transport logistics, that means that the pathogen that's contaminating the food product that you're importing or you're handling or sending to a different place will persist for a longer time, because the food will be usable, the pathogen on it I mean, the food will not spoil, the pathogen can persist, can survive on it undetected. Human movement, we move across the globe, and when we move, we carry our pathogens with us. If you are a person working with food, you are carrying your pathogens from one country to another. Not only human movement, but also animal movement, water movement. They are all factors that can affect the safety of food. Changing eating habits and the shift from low to high protein foods. As economies become stronger, people shift to different kinds of food. As economies collapse, also people shift to different kinds of food, maybe low quality, whatever is available. So all of this can be damaging. So if you are shifting to more protein, there are challenges with producing the animals and keeping the animals safe, and with the, of course, the pathogens that are associated with the animals. If you are in an economic crisis, which many countries are facing right now, you are going to resort to whatever food you can find, and that food might not necessarily be safe. Changing farming practices to feed more people, you have maybe to plant more, you have to farm more livestock. That can lead to concentrated livestock facilities where disease can spread more easily. And we know that diseased animals, many of the foodborne pathogens are also zoonotic agents, that they can either persist on the processed animal in the food chain, or they can be transmitted directly to people who work in the farms. With increasing human population, also there's the intrusion to habitats, because more people, we need more resources, we need more locations that might be we might be coming face to face with new pathogens that we haven't been exposed to before, and it can be a foodborne pathogen. This is it actually has been predicted that we will new strains or new pathogens will emerge, because our knowledge is increasing, right? And our detection method is increasing. Our understanding of the pathogens is increasing. So it's highly likely to discover new pathogens as we go along. Keeping in mind that many of them, Campylobacter, for example, was first identified as Campylobacter in the 70s. Others like other bacteria, they be like Listeria, 80s and 90s. So they are fairly recently, not that they weren't affecting us, but we came to know them, describe them, and understand them, focus on them fairly recently. Uh, um, some of the major issues affecting the production or the affecting food safety is climate change. When climate is changing, that animals are stressed, production of produce is stressed, resources are shifting, uh, vectors change based on temperature, and etc. So climate change is one of the major factors that's going to impact infectious diseases in general and food safety among them. Pollution is another big factor. Water pollution, soil pollution can also impact food. So why I'm talking about this very simplistically, because this talk is leading to One Health, right? So when we talk about climate change and pollution, that's the environmental aspect. When we talk about concentrated farming and changes in agriculture, that's the animal health aspect, right? And the human health aspect, right? So all of these are the different elements actually that go into a One Health approach, keeping in mind that many of the foodborne pathogens that affect humans also affect animals. Example, salmonella, as we know. The same factors that we mentioned earlier also affect zoonotic diseases. So um, due to the global increase in animal production, that means more humans are exposed to animals. That means there's a more possibility for zoonosis. And many of the, as I mentioned earlier, many of the foodborne pathogens, bacterial pathogens, and others, viruses and parasites can be zoonotic. Um, our introduction to new habitats, dwindling resources, right? Because dwindling resources, like we don't have clean water, or we have water that is shared by or visited by wildlife, heavily visited by wildlife that we are using for irrigation, that can be problematic. Other trends related to human behavior that can cause the rise of uh, new pathogens, or the emergence of new pathogens or new strains that can become problematic. One of the best examples is MRSA. MRSA used to be largely human associated. And then, based on a recent study, it was discovered that it jumped to animal, evolved, and then there it became livestock associated RSA, and then it jumped back to humans, and it jumped back to humans with different properties. So there's then, like, this is an example of how a pathogen can emerge due to transmission between humans and animals, and it becomes problematic, and it persists with new properties that can becoming more difficult to treat. Now, a challenge that I consider to be like no other, well, for one, this is what I mainly work on. And the other reason is that we are saying that antibiotic resistance or antimicrobial resistance is becoming a major global issue. It was a major issue, but now the numbers are there to support what we have been talking about for a really long time. So many of the pathogens, especially the bacterial pathogens that we have been talking about, we use antibiotics to treat the patients. We use antibiotics to treat the animals. In some instances, the only way to intervene to heal an animal or to heal a patient is by using antibiotics. There are no other, there's no other recourse. And what we have been seeing since the first discovery of antibiotics with Sir Alexander Fleming, that antibiotic resistance has been on the rise. Food has a major, food production has a major role to play in understanding the rise of antibiotic resistance and in trying to control it. Because even back in the 40s, antibiotics were used with animals. Based on observation, it was found that if antibiotics are given to animals, then they tend to gain weight. And if you can, in a shorter period of time, and if you have an animal that can gain weight in a shorter period of time, that means you have more proteins. That means that you can feed more people. So it was a chance discovery, but a discovery that since the 1940s, many people have been doing. Now, some countries have moved away from using antibiotics as growth promoters. So the emergence of antibiotic resistance is an issue that's affecting everyone, because, as I said, it's the main way to control some of the pathogens that affect animal and humans. So the burden is high, the burden is real, and we are facing it. And these are data collected from the CDC that shows the increase in the resistance of Campylobacter and non-typhoidal salmonella to some drugs of choice in the States, and it shows that the trend is increasing. Not only animals, but recently, for example, streptomycin has been approved for use on citrus to treat a disease. So it's no longer, mainly an animal problem, an animal-associated problem, but it's expanding. Now, to face all of these challenges, we have to adopt an approach that would encompass the role of the environment, the role of the animal, and the role of a human health. And this is where One Health comes in. We cannot just focus on one element. So, because if you have an outbreak, that outbreak can affect any humans, can spread to animals, it can evolve and jump back to humans, or it can spread to the environment and from there to other animals and so on, creating a cycle. So if we want to protect humans, we have to make sure that the environment and the animals also are protected. You cannot, this is something that I always say, is that you cannot produce safe food in a polluted environment. You cannot produce safe food in an animal that's suffering from disease, right? From an animal that's suffering disease and so on. And this is why One Health is great. So I'm going to jump a little bit to show you an example on how we used One Health in our own research to solve a problem. And this problem is mainly colistin resistance. So colistin resistance, this is a study that we have done, several studies that we have done in the Middle East, where we have seen that colistin has been was randomly used in animal agriculture, in animal production, which led to the emergence of MCR1 widely in poultry production in that country, not only in animal production, but also in irrigation and other surface waters like rivers, even into the sea. So it was spreading, right? And from there, it was creating a cycle, because the water is used for animals and the water is used to irrigate produce, and from there to humans. So there was a cycle. So there was an environmental element, an animal health element, and a human health animal, and a human health element. Among the affected animals were fish, pigeons, as I said previously, poultry, and of course, us humans and resources such as water. So what we have done is that we've put all this data together, and we've come up with an approach that controls the use of colistin in agriculture, to ban it in agriculture, and to heavily regulate it in medical operations. And then in the medical operations, the sewage that's coming out of these hospitals, we are proposing to regulate that also this way. you control you control different elements in order to protect humans. So this was a exemplification of the of a good example of applying One Health ethos to solve a problem locally, and it was also shown that that local problem was affecting other countries due to human travel and due to food trade. Last example is we did work on sesame seed products. Sesame seeds were imported to a country, a Middle Eastern country, where they transferred it to a confection known as halfa or into a paste. But it was imported with actually a high rate of salmonella contamination. And when they processed the sesame seed into tahini, into the sesame paste, their processing approach did not get rid of the salmonella, and this was unknown to the processors, to the producers, and from there, the product that they produced was sold in the local market and it was exported. That was a major issue that caused outbreaks actually in other countries. So we identified the problem, focused on importing a better product, and we've put this under control. So again, this is where local efforts affect international impact, have an international impact. We focused on the environment of production, making sure that the water that they are using is clean, making sure that the imported sesame seed is clean, the plant where they are producing the sesame seeds are clean, and then achieved a better, a safer product. With that said, I thank you all very much for allowing me to give with that said, I thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope that you have a great conference. And the last acknowledgement will be to my group that has been working for me for a while now. Thank you so much.